Hello, myself Sultan Ramakrishna here. We are discussing one of the topic that is city creation. City creation basically we are discussing one of the topic that is vitamins. In vitamins, basically we are discussing one of the topic that is yeah, stories. One of the person told that is it possible basically the Earth planet people basically can connect to the this design basically that is basically given as a name as a galaxies. Then one of the person told that then what the nuclear power companies are doing basically they are doing this only basically. Example, I will take one example basically. There is one design basically. This is one design basically. This contains the story of A blood group. So they basically collects the data basically from the Earth planet. Assume that basically A blood group basically have 150 crore people basically. So A blood group that particular person basically has allocated. That means his story basically is going to be like this only basically. So the Bollywood group basically connects to that person basically, who is basically allocated as a blood group basically. So one of the person told that the Bollywood groups are also divided in the blood groups basically. So one of the person told that these blood groups are connected with these Bollywood groups, these blood groups are connected with these Bollywood groups, these blood groups are connected with these Bollywood groups, A blood groups are connected with these Bollywood groups. So they basically connects the stories, and that story basically are collected as a energy basically. For example, A blood group basically will become what basically. A blood groups become what basically. He can become chartered accountant. So it's just see basically up to what level things basically are connected. A blood group becomes chartered accountant. A blood group becomes BE engineering. A blood group basically can become ME. A blood group basically can become doctors. A blood group basically can become software engineers. A blood group basically can become CEO of the company. A blood group basically can become CEO, vice president of the company, of the software companies, or basically the normal companies basically. So this all things basically he can become basically. So according to that become basically what he is going to be basically. He basically has not become big. He basically has not connected to particular post basically. But he is going to be. Why? Because his blood group is this only basically. So that post basically the Indian government have to create basically. That post basically does not exist in this human resource industry basically, that this person can become this only basically. Whatever he do basically is going to become this only. Why? Because his blood group is like this, allocated when he basically got the birth basically. So in this world basically there is no system basically created, that is his blood group can be changed basically. That is not possible basically. But if blood groups are basically getting changed, that basically are very rare basically. Very rare basically that. And that basically is a mistake of government, and government basically never accept the mistakes. If government says that this person basically can't be into the software industry basically, he has to be fired, so they basically do basically to create whatever thing basically they want to. They will spend the crores of rupees, they will spend millions of rupees basically, but they will prove that basically this person is basically not eligible for the software industry. Why? Because government has allocated the blood group when basically he born the when he basically was born basically, that time only basically. So just see up to what level governments are basically. But sometimes basically very rare things basically or happens basically, they accept this they accept the mistakes basically, and they basically allocates that person to the software professional also basically. He basically first he was fired, then basically he gives the good post also basically. But sometimes basically they don't give also. That's that few people say that basically that person basically he basically was a business development officer basically previously basically. But few businessmen development group basically told that basically sorry basically we can't give you the business development post basically. They fired that particular person basically. They fired that particular person. He was actually good business development officer basically. His thinking was totally different basically, and his thinking was beyond the level basically. But he was not got the business development post. He basically fired. After a certain time basically few people basically tracked that. Few people government basically tracked basically, who basically are the mistakes finder basically. So just see basically up to what level things basically are connected, because this whole post basically exists basically, but it's not in front of the government basically. They are supposed to be in front of the government basically. So the post basically they told that basically this was actually he was the good development officer basically. Why basically he was fired? So he basically they basically tracked his human resource data, entire career data basically, how basically he was as a development officer, and what basically was who was the person basically who fired that particular person basically. So they basically tracks, and then basically the the business blood group basically who created the business blood groups basically who created the blood group now basically, they basically say that basically yes basically we can add the blood business development officer post also basically in this blood group, because his blood group was that basically which was not into the particular blood groups database basically, that this particular blood group basically can become business development officer. But business his blood group was assumed that basically his blood group was a positive blood group, but if the business development post basically was into the B positive basically, and his blood group was A, and the business development post basically was allocated to the B basically. So they basically accept the mistakes, and they basically allocates the business development post basically into the A positive blood group also basically. So this type of post also basically exists in the government, but this type of system basically does not exist in the government. So this government basically have to do the improvement basically, and for this basically you have to create one more chain system basically. This was actually taken by the tracked by the particular person basically. If he might not have tracked basically, then basically what you might have done basically, because this is going to connect to the universe, and this is going to connect to the design also basically, because you can't do the things basically. So they basically talk that basically we will create one physical areas basically, for example few hundreds of cities basically, to find the mistakes basically, and this basically does not exist. So you have to create it. That is basically assume that basically 100 city created to collect the mistakes basically. So they basically the environment only basically say that basically this person is basically good in the business development officer here basically. So AI basically comes into the picture. That is basically the group basically who created the AI industry basically. They tracks that particular data, and then basically AI basically does not exist in the India basically. That basically industry is totally outside the India basically. They tracks that basically person basically, and they say that basically this person is good into the business development officer basically. So you can basically take that particular data and basically add into the A blood group also basically, because his blood group was A, and business development officer basically can become basically, that is basically B blood group. So B blood group people only basically can become the business development officer basically, but he proved that basically A positive also basically can do this basically. If that person basically might not have tracked basically, then basically, and he was a good business development officer also basically, and he basically created lots of new ideas also basically. That is basically the chain of the, it might possible that some new design also basically might create in the environment basically, and in the universe also basically. So one of the person told that this need to create basically that mistakes can be found basically from the AI tool basically. AI, why basically I told, because AI equal to digital world, and that 100 city basically is equal to converted to the AI which is going to find basically the errors done by the government basically. So this basically was the thing basically. So like this one of the person told that this basically also is the creation basically which is going to be done basically, and this basically connects to the city creation is always connects to the waterfall diagram basically. So waterfall diagram basically these things basically connects. So one of the person told that in this design basically, this is the design basically where basically the B positive blood groups data basically are collected, but here basically the A positive person basically was connected for this particular post. So here basically the change has happened basically. So in this change basically the design change, because A positive blood group basically are connected with this design. So in A positive blood group data basically this design also basically need to integrate. So that basically will be the change basically, that basically the business that basically the 100 city basically which is going to be created basically as a tracking of the errors basically, that basically can do basically. So one of the person told that basically there are lots of expense basically, yeah, that basically expenses are basically there, expenses basically are there basically, because government basically it's not possible that basically the government always do everything right basically, because they are also human being basically, and human basically do the mistakes basically, humans basically do the mistakes. So like this basically things are basically there. In next video basically we are going to see a little bit more about the designs of the galaxies.